All right, so have you ever thought about like what it takes to transform a place that's just kind of average,
Hmm.
into something truly extraordinary, like the best in the world?
Yeah, and we're not just talking about any industry. We're talking about the fiercely competitive world of fine dining.
Exactly, like reaching the top of those world's best restaurant lists. That's exactly what 11 Madison Park did, and today we're going deep into their story. But it's not just about amazing food.
Right, it goes way beyond that. This deep dive is about this really intriguing concept they call unreasonable hospitality. It's this idea that how you treat people, both your guests and your team, can actually be the thing that sets you apart, the thing that makes you truly stand out.
I love that. And our guide for this exploration is Will Guidara's book, Unreasonable Hospitality. What's really cool is that this isn't just for restaurants. This is about listening to people, genuinely wanting to know about them, and making everyone feel like they belong. It's about creating that feeling of, I'm so glad I'm here.
And that's something we can all apply in our own lives, in our own work. So our mission today is to really unpack this idea of unreasonable hospitality. What does it actually look like in practice? What are the steps? And how can we, or really you listening, take those really interesting insights and memorable stories from 11 Madison Park and apply them to your own world, your own business, your own life?
Perfect. So, right off the bat, the book dives into a core concept, which is the distinction between service and hospitality. And I thought the interview question they used to illustrate this, and then the black and white versus color analogy, was just so brilliant.
Yeah, it really gets to the heart of what's different. So service, that's like the black and white, the nuts and bolts. It's about doing things efficiently and competently, getting the right order to the right person, processing the payment correctly. It's like the mechanics of the whole operation.
Yeah, it's like meeting the basic expectations, right? But then you have hospitality. And that's the color. That's where you bring in the real human connection. You engage with people, you make them feel seen and valued. So they walk away not just because their needs were met, but because they actually felt good about the entire experience.
Exactly. And it's fascinating because 11 Madison Park actually got a lot of initial recognition by really nailing that black and white part. They went from being just a two-star brasserie to landing on the 50 best list by being excellent at those foundational things.
Right, so they already had a solid base. But then, and this is where it gets really interesting, they realized that to become number one, to really reach the top, they needed to shift into technicolor. They needed to bring in that unreasonable, super personalized level of hospitality.
It was a whole mindset shift, a new way of thinking about the guest experience. And the book actually talks about this pivotal moment where they found themselves at the very bottom of the 50 best list.
Oh, wow. I can only imagine how that would feel, like to be at the bottom of that prestigious list.
Right. It was pretty much mortifying. And afterward they ran into Massimo Bottura, the amazing chef from Osteria Francescana, and he kind of laughed and said, "Oh, you guys look so happy up there." And it just really hit home for them. They had so much further to go.
What a wake up call. And it was out of that desire to not just be good, but to be the best that the term unreasonable hospitality was actually born.
Yeah, someone literally scribbled it on a napkin late one night during a brainstorming session. It was like this lightning bolt moment, this idea of pushing past the conventional limits of service to create something really extraordinary by really focusing on how they made people feel.
I love that. So, to understand where this focus on care and attention came from, the book dives into Will Guidara's personal life. And the first story is about his parents and their kind of unexpected love story.
It's so interesting, right? Their story starts all the way back in grade school in Boston. Apparently, Will's dad had this huge fourth grade crush on his mom, but she didn't even remember him.
Isn't that crazy? Life is so strange sometimes. But they reconnected years later, although it wasn't easy. His dad was in Vietnam, and then when they finally met again, they were both engaged to other people. But eventually, they did find their way to each other and got married.
Yeah, it was like destiny, right? And you can really see how that idea of connection and the commitment that came with it really shaped Will's whole worldview. And then there's this incredible story about his mom and her unwavering support, even as her health started to decline.
Yeah, this part is really moving. Even as things got really tough for her physically, she was determined to be there for him. He talks about her driving him to tennis practice, waiting for him in the car, even in those freezing New York winters. That's dedication.
Right. And she had this incredible spirit. Even after a terrible fall that led to her becoming quadriplegic and losing her ability to speak, her presence was so strong.
And his dad's response to all of this was equally amazing. To help Will become more independent, he moved them closer to his school. And then when Will started playing the drums, he was in all sorts of bands: punk, ska, funk, even a Nirvana cover band. She would listen to them practice from the room above the kitchen. Apparently, she loved it. Even the countless times they played Come As You Are.
Wow, so you're picturing this quadriplegic mom
Hmm.
upstairs rocking out to Nirvana. It's just so powerful. You can see how these experiences, despite the challenges, really instilling this deep understanding of what it means to care for someone.
Absolutely. And that brings us to his early days in the restaurant world. One really impactful experience was his involvement in the guest chef's class at Cornell and working with the legendary Daniel Boulud.
Daniel Boulud, what a name, right? This guy is a culinary icon. His restaurant, Daniel, in New York is world-renowned, and he was also the chef at Le Cirque before that. He has restaurants all over the world.
And despite all that success, he was willing to cook for a university class, which shows you his character and his willingness to give back. The book actually highlights his generosity towards young people just starting out in the industry.
And, Will was on the management team for Boulud's dinner, and he came up with this idea to have a chef's table right there in the kitchen. It was the first time they did that for the class. Can you imagine? This formal table set up in the middle of a busy kitchen with a red velvet rope and everything.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to picture. So the dinner is over, and they all end up back at Will's tiny college apartment. And there you have Daniel Boulud, this culinary superstar, in a crappy college kitchen, drinking Milwaukee's Best out of a red Solo cup, making truffled scrambled eggs for a bunch of students.
Talk about down to earth. But what happened next is really incredible. For the first time in 6 years, Will's mom was able to speak clearly. They had a real conversation.
Wow, that must have been such an emotional moment. And sadly, she passed away soon after.
Right. It was so heartbreaking. And Will was actually supposed to leave for an internship in Spain, but his dad encouraged him to go. And on a whim, he emailed Chef Boulud, asking if he could bring his dad to the restaurant.
And Boulud was amazing. He invited them in, and they had this incredible meal. Daniel was personally narrating each course over the intercom. Hours of amazing food, amazing wine, just pure warmth and generosity.
And then, get this, there was no bill. It was just an incredible act of kindness. You know, a perfect example of true hospitality.
Yeah, the book really focuses on that idea of magic and this responsibility to create those moments for others. It obviously had a huge impact on Will.
Absolutely. It showed him the power of a truly thoughtful gesture, especially during a difficult time. And, the book also talks about Will's dad, who worked for Restaurant Associates, which gave Will this early behind-the-scenes look at the restaurant industry.
Yeah, he spent time in some iconic places like Brasserie, Rockefeller Center, Lincoln Center, really seeing how things work.
And then, of course, there's the influence of Danny Meyer and the Union Square Hospitality Group, which is another big part of Will's story.
For sure. He mentions Tabla and 11 Madison Park specifically as restaurants that really impressed him. He could just feel a different energy in those dining rooms. And then he heard Richard Corain from USHG speak at Cornell, and that sealed the deal. He was drawn to their culture.
Right. At that time, Danny Meyer had 4 really well-known restaurants: Union Square Cafe, Gramercy Tavern, 11 Madison Park, and Tabla. And, Union Square Cafe and Gramercy Tavern were consistently ranked among the best in the city.
And Will, even though he admits he was more of a cheeseburger guy than a foie gras guy, he really wanted to work for Danny Meyer. He even had his first interview at 11 Madison Park itself, but ended up taking a manager position at Tabla.
It shows his willingness to step outside his comfort zone, to learn from the best.
Now, let's talk about this cool concept of grace notes. The book uses this great example from Tabla where the servers would give departing guests a 50-cent piece.
It's so interesting, right? It's this tiny little gesture, but it had such a big impact. It was unexpected and delightful, and it happened as guests were leaving, which made it even more memorable, and people were blown away by it.
And what's really interesting is that when they made it a standard practice, when it went from being this spontaneous act to something they always did, it actually became even more powerful. It's like the more routine it was for the staff to give, the more extraordinary it felt for the guests to receive. So think about it. Where in your own interactions could you add a little grace note to create a positive impression?
It's such a powerful idea. And the book also credits Randy Garudi at USHG for his incredible energy and mentorship, emphasizing how letting your own enthusiasm impact others can be so contagious.
Yeah, Randy's pre-meal meetings were legendary. They were like these super inspiring pep talks you see in sports movies. He just had this knack for getting everyone excited and focused on the goal.
And USHG also had these unique new hire meetings led by Danny Meyer himself. That in itself sends a message, right? the CEO taking the time to meet every new employee.
It shows how much they value their people. And the meetings weren't just about the company policies. They focused on the why behind everything. Like, why do we say these phrases? What does our culture really mean?
It was more like a thoughtful orientation than just onboarding. And this leads into the virtuous cycle of enlightened hospitality, which is central to USHG's philosophy. It's this idea that taking care of your employees empowers them to take care of your guests, which in turn benefits the investors. It's a win-win-win.
Yeah, it's not just about being nice, it's about creating a positive cycle that benefits everyone. And Danny Meyer also talked about this difference between restaurant smart and corporate smart companies.
Right, Restaurant Smart is all about autonomy, creativity, that personal touch. Corporate Smart is more about systems, controls, and profits.
And Meyer wanted to find the balance between the two, so Will actually went to work for Restaurant Associates to get that corporate smart experience.
And he tells this great lobster story from his time there. It shows how powerful systems can be when it comes to identifying and solving problems. They noticed this weird spike in lobster costs. And by digging into the data, they were able to figure out exactly what was going on and make a quick decision that saved the company a ton of money.
That's so cool how data can be used like that. And for Will, it made those operational reports suddenly seem way more interesting and important. He then became an assistant general manager and started using what he learned to improve profitability. So think about your own work. What are your lobster metrics? What data do you need to be tracking to catch those potential problems early on?
It's a great question. And, this experience really solidified for Will the importance of taking care of managers so they can take care of their teams. He even tells a story about a disagreement with a colleague named Felix, highlighting the importance of handling those situations with respect.
Yeah, because those interpersonal dynamics can make or break a team. And then this incredible opportunity came up to be part of the reopening of MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, and Danny Meyer asked Will to run all their casual food service operations.
Wow, talk about a cool gig.
Yeah.
That included 2 cafes, the staff cafeteria, and all the in-house catering for MoMA.
Right. It was a huge responsibility, and it was such a unique experience being the first employee in the newly renovated museum. He talks about how his office kept getting moved further and further down from a nice fifth-floor space with a view of the sculpture garden all the way down to the sub-basement.
So funny. They were obviously prioritizing other things over the food and beverage program at first, but this role led Will to really focus on the details, like the design of the gelato cart for the sculpture garden.
Yeah, I mean, they're surrounded by Picassos and Matisses, so even a gelato cart has to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
The book mentions how much attention they paid to the design of the gelato spoon.
Exactly. And that attention to detail ties into this concept of the rule of 955. Maybe you can explain that a little more.
Sure, the rule of 955 is about focusing your resources, your time, energy, budget on that exceptional 5% of the experience, the part that creates a lasting memory. So, for example, with wine pairings, you might have a few really good but not super expensive pairings throughout the meal, but then you offer one truly incredible, rare, and maybe pricey glass towards the end. That one glass becomes the thing people remember.
It's about creating those wow moments strategically. And the book tells this great story about a family who came to MoMA with sleds in the winter. After their meal, the team arranged for a driver to take them to Central Park so they could actually go sledding. It might seem like a crazy gesture, but it created a memory that they'll probably never forget. So where are those 5% moments in your own interactions? Where could you go the extra mile to make a big impact?
That's such a great question to ask yourself. But the path to excellence isn't always smooth. The book mentions this really negative experience where a chef de cuisine yelled at Will for dropping some plates.
Yeah, that's never okay. It really highlights how a leader's actions can affect the whole team dynamic. It created this atmosphere of disrespect towards the dining room staff.
It's a reminder that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their role. So after his time at MoMA, Will made a deal with Danny Meyer to be the GM of 11 Madison Park for 1 year, with the condition that he'd then work at Shake Shack afterward.
Wow, what a contrast. So he goes to 11 Madison Park, and it sounds like he walked into a bit of a mess. There was this division between the old staff and the new fine dining squad they brought in.
Yeah, and there were inconsistencies in training and expectations. Like, the book gives this example of how different managers were teaching the staff different ways to carry a tray.
That's so frustrating. And to make things worse, they were constantly throwing new information at the staff. New menus, new suppliers, a massive wine list.
Yeah.
It's just overwhelming.
Yeah, it's no wonder people were struggling to keep up. This brings us to the idea of building a strong organizational culture. The book makes this point that in companies with a really strong culture, doing things the wrong way just feels wrong to everyone.
It's like this internal compass, right?
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case at EMP yet. Things weren't aligned. And the book emphasizes the importance of leaders really listening to their teams.
Right. There's this quote from a speech by Christopher Russell at Union Square Cafe that really stood out to me. It's about putting the restaurant first, knowing that by doing so, you're also taking care of the team. It's this sense of shared purpose.
So Will's first move as GM was to sit down with every single member of the EMP team and just listen. It took a long time, but it was so valuable.
Yeah, it showed them that he valued their opinions. And he also had this knack for seeing people's strengths. There's this great story about a guy named Elazar who was struggling as a food runner.
Yeah, he wasn't that passionate about the food itself, but he was super organized and a natural leader.
Exactly. So Will made him an expediter, and he thrived in that role.
It's a great lesson in finding the right fit for people. The book also talks about the importance of praise and criticism.
Yeah, they actually had a Made Nice award to recognize employees who went above and beyond.
It's amazing how simple things like that can motivate people.
Yeah.
But they were also careful about how they gave criticism. They believed in addressing small issues early on in a clear and respectful way. The unironed shirt example really illustrates that.
It's so true. If you let those small things slide, they can turn into bigger problems. And Will also realized that he needed to be consistent as a leader and apologize when he messed up.
Yeah, owning your mistakes is so important. And to address the information overload problem, he brought back detailed pre-meal notes. He even designed a template to make sure they were clear and easy to read.
And they actually reduced some of the side work to make time for those 30-minute pre-meal meetings. They realized they were asking too much of the team too soon.
It's about recognizing your limits, right? So they cut back on what the team needed to learn and focused on the essentials. And then, Will gave this really inspiring speech to everyone, outlining the vision for 11 Madison Park and promising consistency and fairness.
He used this cover me metaphor to emphasize the importance of teamwork and trust. It's like you know someone has your back no matter what.
So like if you're clearing a table and you're struggling, someone will jump in to help without even being asked. That's a powerful feeling. So how strong is that cover me feeling in your own team?
It's a question worth asking. Now, shifting gears a bit, the book talks about passion and collaboration. It makes this interesting point that the most fulfilled people are often those who are genuinely passionate and aren't afraid to show it.
Right. It goes against that whole idea of being cool and aloof. They use Brian Callis as an example. He was just so genuinely himself, and it made caring cool.
I love that. And there's this anecdote about the synchronized soup service at EMP that shows how the team was starting to work together more seamlessly.
Yeah, they were becoming more coordinated and caring. And then there's this surprising influence of Miles Davis. A review compared their work to his music, and it really resonated with the team.
That's so cool. They actually wrote down 11 words that describe Davis's music. Cool, endless reinvention, inspired, forward-moving, fresh, collaborative, spontaneous, vibrant, adventurous, light, and innovative. And this list became their roadmap for how they wanted to evolve.
What a creative way to find inspiration. And this led to their first big strategic planning meeting, where every single person on the team participated.
That's amazing. Everyone was included, from the assistant general manager to the dishwashers. It gave everyone a sense of ownership.
And out of that meeting, 4 key words emerged: education, passion, excellence, and hospitality. And what's interesting is they recognize the tension between excellence and hospitality. It's easy to focus on one over the other.
Right, but they wanted both. They called it integrative thinking. And this is a great takeaway for everyone. Don't feel like you have to choose between two good things. Find a way to make them work together.
Exactly. They believe that hospitality actually elevates the act of service, both for the person giving it and the person receiving it. It's about perspective, like seeing MoMA visitors as museum goers instead of just customers.
Yeah, it changes the whole dynamic. So this strategic planning meeting really energized the team. And then they visited Per Se, another top restaurant, and paid incredible attention to detail. They even noticed how neatly the blue tape was cut in the kitchen.
It's that obsession with perfection, right? But they also noticed some areas where fine dining was falling short, like the coffee and cocktails.
And within their team, they had people who were passionate about these things: craft beer, tea, coffee. So they created these ownership programs.
Yeah, Jim took over the coffee program, and Kirk Calloway ran the beer program. It was about empowering people to take ownership and pride in their areas.
And it wasn't just formal programs. Team members started leading the pre-meal meetings, which helped them with public speaking.
And new reservationists were immediately paired with experienced team members to foster collaboration and contribution. So they're really building a strong team here.
Now, remember Frank Bruni, the New York Times critic? The book talks about the moment he came back to EMP for a potential re-review.
Oh man, the pressure must have been intense.
Right. And this is where Will's perfectionism really kicked in. They focused on every single detail, from the kitchen to the dining room, the uniforms, the music, everything.
They even obsess over the placement of the plates. They believe that how you do one thing is how you do everything. It's like that Walt Disney story about the animatronic bird that breathes. People might not notice it consciously, but they can feel the perfection.
And all that effort paid off. They got 3 stars from the New York Times. Huge celebration.
Amazing. But of course, there were setbacks too. They were disappointed when they didn't win a James Beard Award, but they focused on supporting Daniel and celebrating what they had achieved.
They also had disagreements, like the debate about using chargers, but they talked it through and came up with a solution that actually improved the experience.
It's about healthy communication and compromise. But there were also moments where things got heated, like when Daniel threw food at a cook.
Yeah, the book doesn't shy away from that. It highlights how important it is for leaders to model good behavior. Sarcasm and anger are never the answer.
It's about giving feedback thoughtfully and respectfully. They also made some changes to their holiday policies, deciding to stay open for Thanksgiving and close for a longer period in January.
Shows they were willing to adapt. And then there's this great story about their application to Relais and Chateau. They missed the deadline, and Daniel Boulud stepped in to help.
He arranged a dinner for them with Thomas Keller and Patrick O'Connell.
Can you imagine? That must have been incredible. It shows the power of relationships and external validation.
And they were worried about losing staff to other restaurants, so they focused on creating an environment where people wanted to stay. They eventually got into Relais and Chateau, which was a big win.
And they had these little rituals to help the team through stressful times, like the DBC, the deep belly breath, and a system of hand signals inspired by baseball to ask for help discreetly.
It's about supporting each other,
Right.
And during the recession, they had to get creative with cost cutting, but they were determined to never let it affect the guests.
They actually introduced a more affordable lunch menu, which brought in a whole new crowd, and then Frank Bruni came back for another visit, and everyone was like, this is it. He's here for the 4-star review.
The tension. And they were right. They got 4 stars from the New York Times. Bruni described it as a magnitude of enchantment.
So they had achieved this incredible level of excellence, but then their focus shifted even more towards hospitality, towards being truly present with each guest.
And that brings us to the heart of Unreasonable hospitality. They had a team meeting and decided to go for it, to become the best restaurant in the world.
And here's the thing. They didn't necessarily know exactly how they were going to do it, but they were committed to figuring it out. They wanted to apply the same passion and precision to hospitality that they did to the food.
The book contrasts their approach with the typical focus on culinary excellence at awards like the 50 Best. They wanted to be known for both.
So they started with the front door. They reimagined the entire arrival experience.
They would Google guest reservations beforehand so they could greet them by name. They had a system for making sure tables were ready seamlessly. It was all about creating that feeling of being welcomed and expected.
They also moved away from the traditional prefix menu and had more conversations with guests about what they wanted to eat. Will even tells a story about his dislike of sea urchin to encourage guests to be open about their preferences.
It's about treating every guest like a VIP, right? And they wanted to make those special moments accessible to everyone. So they redesigned the kitchen tour to include a standing chef's table.
And they never just dropped the check. They always had it ready, but often offered a complimentary bottle of wine or cognac at the end.
And then there's the famous street hot dog story. It's a perfect example of personal, unexpected hospitality. It wasn't about the hot dog itself, it was the gesture, the story.
These little acts of magic became known as legends, and they really brought a sense of fun and creativity to the team.
They even gave their own team members an even more special experience when they dined at EMP. It's like that story about Ruth's Chris Steakhouse where they always brought this one regular, his favorite fried calamari, even though it wasn't on the menu.
So they created the Dreamweaver program, a toolkit of resources and ideas for creating these legends. They had maps of favorite local spots, Empire State Building tickets, to-go cups for smokers, Tiffany champagne flutes for engagements.
And some of the best legends, like the fake doctor's note and the hangover kit, became part of this toolkit.
The point is, it's not about how much something costs, it's about how it makes the other person feel.
And it's about balancing those planned gestures with spontaneous, in-the-moment hospitality.
The book says these opportunities exist in every business, like real estate agents going beyond the standard bottle of wine to give new homeowners personalized gifts, like outlet covers for a family with a baby or a Chemex coffee maker for a coffee lover.
So what are the outlet covers in your own field? What are those thoughtful touches that would really resonate with people?
So this journey led them to new ventures like the Nomad Hotel. They wanted to make the hotel restaurant an integral part of the experience again.
And they had to raise a lot of money to buy 11 Madison Park outright. They met this investor, Noam Gottsman, who was instrumental in making that happen.
And just like Miles Davis inspired EMP, the Rolling Stones inspired the Nomad. Specifically, their ability to constantly reinvent themselves while staying true to who they are.
They even created a field manual for the Nomad to codify their culture and values. And they got 3 stars from the New York Times for the Nomad, too.
But Will started to feel stretched too thin running both places. A conversation with Cheryl Hefner made him realize he needed to name a successor at EMP.
So they came up with a new vision for EMP, a New York-themed tasting menu with fun elements like black and white cookies and a magic trick.
Yeah. And Will realized he needed to trust his team more, to let go of some control. He had this experience at another restaurant where the tasting menu was so complex and there were so many interruptions that it was overwhelming.
They actually calculated that there were like 90 interruptions during a 15-course meal.
So they simplified their mission statement to be the most delicious and gracious restaurant in the world. They cut the menu in half and doubled the Dreamweaver.
And they got rid of the printed menu altogether, having more of a dialogue with guests about what they wanted to eat. It was inspired by Rouse, a very old-school New York restaurant.
And it sounds like all these changes really brought the restaurant to life. They felt confident when they hosted a group of 50 best voters.
And then the moment arrived. 11 Madison Park was named the best restaurant in the world.
It was the culmination of years of hard work and dedication to excellence and hospitality.
And the book ends with Will deciding to leave EMP. He emphasizes that the heart of the company was the team and the principles they built together. He believes they can do it again.
He also thanks the people who helped him along the way, especially Laura Tucker, who helped him write the book, and of course, Danny Meyer.
So what's the takeaway for you listening?
It's about understanding that unreasonable hospitality is a mindset. It's about going above and beyond to make people feel seen, welcomed, and cared for. And it's not just for restaurants. It's a universal principle that can be applied anywhere.
Absolutely. And as you go about your day, think about this. How can you apply these principles to your own life, your own work, your own interactions? What's the color you can add to your own black and white?